A marine flare is an unmistakable distress signal. You and I both know what that means. Anyone who's spent time on the water knows someone is in deep trouble. It means somebody needs immediate rescue. There is no other interpretation. Firing a flare into the dead of night, off the Abaco coast, means just one thing. Someone out there is begging for their life. Suspect Brian Hooker told investigators that after Lynette went overboard, he shot off a flare from his 8-foot dinghy. He claimed he tried signaling passing vessels, but nobody stopped to help him. In a recorded 40-minute phone call obtained by reporters, he told Blaine Stevenson he watched multiple boats cruise right by. He claimed he waved his phone flashlight and fired a flare to get their attention. He insisted this all happened from that tiny dinghy miles away from their main vessel. But according to the case files, multiple witnesses near Elbow Cay spotted a flare that exact night. They were a group of musicians hanging out together. 3 distinct witnesses, and their statements all line up perfectly. They all pinpointed the exact time frame. And when they spoke on the record to investigative reporters who had boots on the ground in the Bahamas, their stories matched perfectly. But they agreed on one chilling detail. That flare did not come from a drifting dinghy. It was fired straight from a 45-foot yacht. The vessel named Soulmate. The exact yacht Brian swore to detectives he and Lynette never returned to that night. The victim, Lynette Hooker, was 55. Originally from Michigan, she traded her entire life to live on the water with Brian. Her career, her home, absolutely everything. They had been sailing together for over a decade, documenting their supposed dream life. Sea turtles' perfect sunsets, baking fresh cinnamon rolls on the deck of Soulmate. That 45-foot vessel wasn't just a boat, it was their only home for 4 straight years. Looking at the victimology, her mother Darlene told reporters that Lynette grew up on the water. She spent her entire life swimming and sailing. Her daughter Carly stated clearly that Lynette was incredibly fit and a strong swimmer. The idea that she just clumsily fell overboard makes zero sense. Her final social media post was uploaded on April 4, 2026, the day she vanished. The caption read, "I am not going anywhere for a while." She had no idea. Before we dive deeper into this timeline, make sure you hit subscribe and turn on notifications. As an analyst, I only care about the paper trail. We scrutinize the evidence, cite our sources, and rely solely on verified public records. No wild speculation. Let's examine the evidence together. We need to discuss what those witnesses actually saw around 8 p.m. on April 4th. Surveillance footage captured 3 specific moments that nobody thought twice about. But Brian's alibi regarding where he was when that flare launched, and his explanation for why the flare originated from that specific vessel. It completely shatters his entire story. To grasp why these witness statements are so damning, we have to look closely at Brian Hooker's timeline. If his 8 p.m. alibi is real, certain things must be true. The night of April 4th, 2026, between the recorded call with Stevenson and what he told law enforcement, he built a very specific sequence of events. He claims they boarded the dinghy, and then Lynette somehow went overboard. He tried reaching her. He drifted in the dark. He claims he threw an anchor, screamed her name, and finally headed toward Lubber's quarters. He launched a flare. He couldn't get past the North Shore, so he kept rowing. He eventually hit a Marsh Harbor boatyard and finally contacted someone around 4 a.m. The gap between leaving the dock and that flare going up, that takes time. Every single step takes time. Surveillance footage from the Abaco Inn, identified by Carly and Steve, shows Brian and Lynette exiting around 6:38 p.m. They're heading for the docks. The local fire and rescue chief confirmed it's a 15-minute ride from the pier to Aunt Pat's Bay, where Soulmate was moored. Chief Todd actually went out on the rescue boat with Brian the very next morning. He knows these waters like the back of his hand. If they left at 6:38, a 15-minute transit puts the incident right around 6:53 p.m. Sunset on April 4th was at exactly 7:26 p.m. The chief directly verified the 6:38 departure time on the record with journalists. So it was still completely daylight out there, unmistakably bright. It wouldn't get completely dark for another 45 minutes to an hour. So let's take Brian's own recorded statement and map out his internal timeline. Brian claimed the sun went down about 10 minutes after Lynette went overboard. He said he threw the anchor down and started screaming her name. He calculated he was a quarter to a half mile away from her by that point. He told police he eventually drifted toward Lubber's quarters. That is when he says he fired the flare. Let's add up those steps from the exact moment she fell. The panicked attempt to reach her, dropping the anchor, drifting helplessly in the current. The full hour of screaming her name. Rowing violently toward Lubber's quarters, according to his own official statement. That is when he supposedly decided to fire the flare. If we strictly follow the suspect's internal clock and the sequence he laid out, that distress flare had to be fired right around 8 p.m. Now hold on to that exact timestamp. Today you and I are going to cross-reference this with what witnesses told Ashley Banfield. They saw a bright flash around 8 p.m. Not from the little dinghy between Abaco Inn and Aunt Pat's Bay. It came from the sailboat, not the vessel drifting south toward Lubber's quarters. It came from Soulmate. The 45-foot fishing boat anchored and supposedly empty in Aunt Pat's Bay. The exact boat Brian told investigators that he and Lynette never reached. A boat that was supposed to be a ghost ship at 8 p.m., the night of April 4, 2026. Ashley Banfield publicly confirmed this on her Drop Dead Serious podcast, backed completely by her on-the-ground reporting. Multiple witnesses, at least 3 in the same group, reported a bright flash originating from Soulmate around 8 p.m. They were standing on land over at Elbow Cay. They were staring right across the Sea of Abaco, straight toward where the sailboat sat anchored. They all saw it. They agreed on the exact spot. Now you and I face the unavoidable question this timeline raises. If Brian Hooker was stranded in the water in a small boat around 8 p.m. like he told police, and the Stevensons who fired that flare from the sailboat, you will find absolutely nothing in Brian Hooker's official recorded testimony that clearly answers that glaring question. Either someone else was hiding on the boat, Brian was on it, or the witnesses are completely wrong about the vessel. Those are the only 3 logical possibilities. Investigators are desperately trying to figure out which narrative is accurate. Brian Hooker hasn't been charged with any crime. He firmly denies any foul play. But the mystery remains. Who fired that flare around 8 p.m.? That question is permanently on the public record. You can't unask it. And another piece of evidence doesn't just dismiss the flare theory, it actually makes it the focal point. It was caught on a security camera, one that wasn't even set up for surveillance. It belonged to a guy who just wanted to watch the Sea of Abaco from anywhere in the world. Dean Zambrello mounted it at his house on Lubber's quarters. It points east across the water toward Elbow Cay, the exact direction where Soulmate was anchored in Aunt Pat's Bay on the night of April 4th. The camera continuously records every single second, day and night. Dean shared this footage with Ashley Banfield and her producer Lindsay. They spent roughly 5 grueling hours analyzing every single frame of the video. Dean's daughters Katie, Kelly, Julianne, and Brooke helped pinpoint coastal landmarks. That allowed them to estimate exactly where Soulmate sat within the frame. The footage is incredibly grainy. The sailboat sits about a mile away from Dean's lens. This is the genuine limitation of this digital evidence, stated plainly here. Ashley Banfield herself admits it. She cannot definitively swear that the blurry shape on camera is Soulmate. What she can state permanently on the public record is that based on confirmed reference points and calculated measurements, the object shown at a very specific timestamp perfectly matches where Soulmate was anchored in Aunt Pat's Bay. It was 7:47 p.m., April 4th, 2026. Roughly 17 minutes after Brian claimed he and Lynette left the dock, the camera caught a strange light anomaly exactly where Soulmate was parked. An intense flash visible a full mile away on a bad camera. Ashley Banfield explained it. Based on consultations with experienced sailors who studied photos of Soulmate's rigging. They said it matched an automatic security spotlight mounted on a fishing boat's stern, a light strictly designed to flood the back deck if someone approaches from the water. That spotlight perfectly matches a beam triggering when someone pulls up in a small boat. That was 7:47 p.m., 13 minutes before the 8 p.m. flare. The exact time witnesses on Elbow Cay saw a flare shoot up from Soulmate. Then at 12:27 a.m. on April 5th, hours after Brian claimed he was drifting helplessly, and hours before he reported rolling into Marsh Harbor around 4 a.m., that same camera caught another strange light anomaly right at Soulmate's location. A beam resembling a flashlight appeared to be moving slowly around the boat's perimeter. That stern spotlight seemed to click on again, like something or someone had physically tripped the motion sensor on the back deck. 5 minutes later at 12:32 a.m., another event. Multiple short bursts of light, the kind a moving flashlight makes. The camera captured those thin beams darting in random directions. Then, the stern light fired up again for 53 seconds before the boat went pitch black. Brian Hooker insisted nobody could have made it back to that vessel. That is his sworn recorded testimony to police and the people who trusted him. The 45-foot boat was supposed to be securely anchored and completely empty. From the second he and Lynette left the dock until he reached the Marsh Harbor yard before 4 a.m., nobody was supposed to be anywhere near that ship. Yet a camera recorded faint movement on that supposedly ghost ship at 7:47 p.m. Then again at 12:27 and 12:32 a.m. Now stick with me. Let's examine the background details Ashley Banfield confirmed through confidential sources, former coworkers, and sealed court records. This adds a chilling layer to the technical forensic profile of our suspect. Brian Hooker was an AT&T telephone repairman. According to several colleagues who knew his work, he was highly proficient with technology. He knew exactly how communication networks operated. He understood tracking hardware. He mastered GPS. He knew precisely what leaves a digital footprint and what vanishes completely. According to a source confirmed in court documents, Brian was fired from AT&T. Allegedly, he tampered with his company van's GPS to fake his location. He created false records of his whereabouts. Today, you and I are unpacking a case where GPS manipulation sits at the dead center of a disappearance. Brian Hooker has never been charged with a crime. His defense attorney, Terrell Butler, stated that Hooker denies all wrongdoing and is fully cooperating with authorities. His Michigan-based lawyer, Crystal Marie Hauer, recently told ABC News that Brian would never hurt his wife of 25 years, begging the public to give him the benefit of the doubt. In his first interview after being released from custody, Brian claimed he never harmed Lynette. He publicly stressed that finding her was his one and only goal. But the Royal Bahamas Police Commissioner confirmed to NBC News that Brian remains a suspect. He is not cleared. He could be rearrested. Let's sift through the timeline together. What do we actually know as fact? Multiple witnesses at Elbow Cay saw a flare around 8 p.m. coming from the direction of the Soulmate on April 4, 2026. Ashley Banfield confirmed this on the ground. These were 3 separate people in the same group, all reporting the exact same thing. A security camera owned by Dean Zamgil, set up in the Lubbers residential area, caught light flashes near the Soulmate at 7:47 p.m., 12:27 and 12:32 a.m. Brian told police he was on a small dinghy then. He told detectives he never made it back to the Soulmate that night. Brian was fired for manipulating GPS. Court documents confirm this. But what remains unverified? We cannot be certain if the boat in Zamgil's footage actually is the Soulmate. What caused those specific light flashes? Who fired the flare the witnesses saw? Were there other people or vessels in those waters that night? Investigators eventually found the Soulmate. According to a CBS News search warrant, they seized serious hardware. A digital video recorder, digital tablets, and cell phone equipment were listed as physical evidence tied to potential bodily harm of a missing person. It includes Apple Watch data directly confirmed by the Coast Guard to Lynette's mother, Darlene. It holds Brian's call logs and texts. It stores his conflicting records, the stories he told different people in different contexts. Then there is the footage TMZ obtained and published on April 25, 2026. It shows Brian aboard the Soulmate on April 6, 2 days after Lynette vanished, 2 days before his arrest. He is chatting with a nearby boater. The fellow boater offered his condolences. Standing on the Soulmate, Brian talks about his anchor over the recording. He mentions he might need help, noting he has never brought the topic up himself before. Watching that interaction, his focus does not seem to be on finding his wife. TMZ reported he seemed almost entirely focused on just leaving the area. That footage is public record now. What does that tell detectives? Stick with me here, because we need to look at the bigger picture surrounding these flare sightings. Brian's explanation relies on a very specific physical reality. Around 8 p.m. on April 4th, he was on the water in a small dinghy, miles away from the woman he loved, firing flares from his boat, unable to reach her, unable to save his wife. Yet witnesses reported a flash around 8 p.m., coming directly from the Soulmate. A camera a mile away caught light at the Soulmate's location at 7:47 p.m., 13 minutes before the witnesses saw the flare. That same camera caught flashes there at 12:27 and 12:32 a.m. According to Brian, he was still drifting toward Marsh Harbor in the dinghy at that time. The boat where witnesses saw the flare launch. The boat. The camera caught flashing was the 45-foot vessel Brian claims he never returned to. So who was on that boat? That is the burning question at the core of the witness sightings and Zamjal's camera footage. It is the exact mystery investigators are trying to unravel with physical evidence. The yacht's equipment, the Apple Watch data, and the digital footprint of every phone operating around the soulmate on the night of April 4th. Darlene Hamlet is 76 years old, sitting in Florida, waiting for a call that never come. She told Ashley Banfield, "I have nothing else to give you but my love. And the wish that you would just come home." Carly Aylesworth flew to the Bahamas. She walked the shoreline, where cadaver dogs were working. She went to the exact spot Brian said Lynette fell, noting her mother could have easily swam those few feet to shore. Standing on the dock, staring at the soulmate, she whispered to nobody, "Mom, I am here, wherever you are." Lynette Hooker called the ocean her happy place. She spent a decade documenting that joy on a page called The Sailing Hookers. She was 55, healthy, strong. Let's examine the timeline. She swam her whole life. Home was a 45-foot fishing vessel moored in Aunt Pat's Bay. On April 4, 2026, near 8 p.m., a distress flare went up. Multiple witnesses confirmed seeing that flare launch from a yacht. Brian, however, claims he was out at sea, 4 miles from the launch site. This investigation remains wide open. If you hold any details regarding Lynette Hooker's disappearance, or if you were near Elbow Cay or Aunt Pat's Bay on April 4, 2026, witnessing that flare, or if you possess footage from that night, contact the Royal Bahamas Police Force or the United States Coast Guard. Both cases remain fully active. Submit anonymous tips via the CGIS app on any mobile phone. Ashley Banfield, from the Drop Dead Serious series. Takes emails at dropdeadseriousinfo@gmail.com. Brian Hooker has not been charged with any crime. His defense attorney states he categorically denies any foul play. Every individual mentioned is presumed totally innocent until formally convicted in a court of law. This is the Global Crime Files. Because every single victim has the absolute right to know the truth. And every story demands to be told.